Welcome to another edition of Our City. Please keep in mind that residents can visit our social media accounts or look at elizabethnjvaccine.org if you're interested in any vaccines or COVID testing. Keep in mind that the virus is still with us, even though the numbers have subsided in a big way. So personal responsibility about the spread of the virus is important. You want any information, you can call our public information office at 908-820-4124. And as we are in African American History Month, I'm pleased to be joined by the Reverend Dr. Wanda Lundy, who is the pastor of Siloam-Hope First Presbyterian Church. Dr. Lundy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you've been a great asset to our city since you got here. So my first question is, how'd you get here? Where are you from? Tell us about yourself.
Okay, thank you for that question. Well, how I got here, I believe that the ancestors brought me. I grew up in Alabama, spent most of my life in the South, and in 1988 I came to New York City to work at Rikers Island to open the women's jail there. And I'm a country girl, so I've been trying to get back to Alabama since 1988, but my assignment is not up. I came to Elizabeth to preach at Siloam-Hope First Presbyterian Church, and have just fallen in love with Elizabeth. The people, the place is wonderful here.
You even moved here?
I actually moved here.
Yeah.
It was after your State of the City address. I was like, wow, this is a place I'd like to live in.
I know, that was impressive when you told me that story.
Yeah,
Dr.
it's
Lundy.
true.
I was like, wow, because a lot of times you get assigned in a theological role or any other job for that matter, and people kind of stay where they are. They like their living quarters, but you uprooted yourself and came here.
Yes, I did.
So it's great. Well, you've been a great asset in not only the church, but the 313 project that we're going to talk about. Because your efforts have helped tremendously fill a void, for lack of a better word, in a cemetery that's been historical in our community. So tell us first, not only what is the 313 project, and then we'll get into your involvement and how you got started.
Okay, so the 313, we call it 313 Plus Ancestors Speak Project, is a project to honor the ancestors that are buried in the Old First Cemetery. There are 313, potentially up to 384 free and enslaved Africans buried in unmarked graves. And so this project is to build a monument to put their names on it so that their names can be known, can be read, can be called, and also to do research because we want to also be able to tell their stories. And the third thing that we want to do is to put an interpretive museum in Snyder Academy. We already have a small museum for the church there, but we want to be able to expand that to tell not only the stories of the 313 free and enslaved Africans, but all of the history that is on that property. So
when you talk about free and enslaved, there are some markers, right? And we can tell by the letter COL. Yes. That they were of African American heritage.
Yes.
That meant colored, right, in the old days?
Correct.
Who would know? Who knew that? I mean, that's been passed down towards history, right? I never knew that. What that meant until people like you explained it to me.
Well, it's recorded. I mean, we have the burial book from the church. We have one that's from 1766. The ones before that were burned. As you know, the church burned twice, so the records burned. But the one that exists starts from 1766. And in that book, we have Lafayette Boylston. He is the one who has a marker in the cemetery. And in the top right corner, it says COL''D. So you know surely that this is one of the enslaved ancestors. It's said that his owner, the person who owned him, paid for his burial, and that's how he ended up with the marker.
That's how he got a marker, because most of the people wouldn't bother paying for the market, right?
Well, they didn't have, their owners didn't pay,
Right.
and they didn't have the money, right?
So how can you tell a free from an enslaved person? Is that part of the research?
The spreadsheet that we have, some of that information was in the burial book. So the burial book was transcribed by one of the pastors. It was a project that he started. If I'm not mistaken, one of the librarians at the library and also at Boxwood Hall, Catherine Craig, helped with that process. So in the notes, in the minutes, in the book, it has some of it shows who owned them. It gives their age. It gives the date that they were buried. We have 117 first and last names, 40 something either the first name or the last name, and the rest of them are unknowns. So even the ones that are listed as unknown, we know the year that they died, and we also, most of them know what gender they were and if they were
Because
a child.
that's recorded?
That's recorded.
Okay. So the free or enslaved is still difficult to find?
On the list, there's only listed one.
Did they actually write the word free?
It says a free Negro. Her name was Hannah. Yes.
Okay, that's what they write down.
Yes.
And do you know when the first burial ever occurred there?
The list that we have is 1766.
So if you were buried before that, which was burned, we
don't
wouldn't know.
We don't have that information.
Okay. And is there a technology that can tell how many graves are actually in there? Like sonar? I mean,
Well,
you watch all these crazy TV shows, so you wonder if you can tell the plots or something.
Well, that's a really important question because one of the research documents that we have is entitled 384 Bodies Under the Parking Lot, which suggests that there may be some who were at one point buried under what is now known as the parking lot behind the church.
The parking lot for the county?
For
That
the
far
church.
back?
For the church.
Oh, the parking lot for the church where you parked some cars over there. Okay.
So we've asked that question, and we're still asking the question,
Okay.
whether or not we can determine if there actually are bodies under the parking lot. So that is a question that's important to us.
When you came here, you naturally were not aware of this, and it fascinates me because I love history. So what motivated you? By the way, I'm glad Alabama gave you up. So what motivated you to get involved? How did you become involved in this project?
As I said, I came to preach on Sundays, and I was very intentional to make sure that I didn't park in anybody's parking lot. Parking space, so I would park
That's
up
a big
against.
thing in New Jersey, by the way.
I know it's a big thing with church folk.
Okay.
Don't sit in their pew and don't park in their parking space. So I would park against the fence over next to the courthouse. There was some wood over there. I wanted to be out of the way, and this was in 2019 in the fall. In October, the 4 Centuries in a Weekend event came, which happens every year in Union County. And the church announced, we need volunteers to help. And I said to myself, well, I don't know the history, but I have extra hands, right? I went over to the museum in Snyder Academy because all of the information had been about the Europeans. I mean, it is a historical site. It is where New Jersey began, right? But I had not heard anything about African Americans. So when I went into the museum, I saw this picture up on the wall that had a little boy, a little black boy, in revolutionary garb. And I said, oh, I finally see a black person. You know, I said that, and the person who was in the room said, yeah, you know, we have 313 slaves in the cemetery. And
Just like off the cuff.
Yeah, I mean, it took my breath away. It took me a while to really prepare myself, because I said to the person, wait, just give me a second, just give me 1 second, and then I want you to say it again. So after saying it 3 times, I was fascinated. I was floored. I went through so many emotions. And she said, we have their names on a spreadsheet. And I was like, please let me see it. Please send it to me. So from that point on, I have just been called to do this. I truly believe that much of my experiences leading up to this prepared me for it. I just didn't know that I was coming here to do this, in addition to be with the First Presbyterian Church, Siloam-Hope First Presbyterian Church family.
Because that church was originally on Route 1.
Siloam-Hope Memorial was on Route 1.
Right.
First Presbyterian. So those two churches merged together, and now they're called Siloam-Hope First Presbyterian Church. But everyone that I would talk to, I would say that one of the first visitors that came on the property was Chief Saka, and he was introducing me to the property because, of course, this is his home, and so he was telling me about all of the history. I said, "Did you know that there were 313 free and enslaved people buried in the cemetery?" And he didn't know it.
None of us did.
And so
I grew up here. None of us knew that.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing for me. So from that point, what I heard the ancestors say clearly to me is, we want our names called. We want our names called too. And we want our stories told. And so that's what this project is about. It is about honoring the ancestors by calling their names, by identifying descendants of those who are buried in the cemetery. Hopefully, this project will inspire people to want to find out if they have relatives in the cemetery. And also to inspire all of us to research our history. We all have a story. We all have ancestors. And we move in such a fast world that sometimes we forget the importance of them. So
who else is involved in the project?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. So the City of Elizabeth has been very, very helpful, very helpful. I received a call before I knew anyone. I was on the phone and this person kept calling back and I didn't recognize the number. So finally I answered it and he said, "This is Stan Neron from the City of Elizabeth. I would like to talk with you. We would like to submit a grant for your project." And I'm telling you, from that point on, the ancestors, I say, have sent people to help the Elizabeth Police Department. I can't say enough about the Recreation Department in Elizabeth, the Fire Department, the Marble Factory, Fedway, Dolce, the Old First Historic Trust, Bayway World of Liquor, the Historic Midtown SID, the Elizabeth Destination and Marketing Organization, the Elizabeth Fast Ferry, Fortuna Cigars, Summit Sounds, Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage, the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, and I'm actually just naming organizations, not individuals. I have not met anyone who did not want to be a part of this project.
So as a guy who likes history, it's fascinating for me that project is moving forward. What do you think the impact would be on the City of Elizabeth? Because I don't mean to say this, but you're an outsider. You're new, right? You're new. So I lived here all my life. I think it's terrific. What do you think it does for our city?
Well, I think it does a couple of things. One is it brings people together. It's creating community. You have people who are coming together who had not met each other, who didn't know each other. One of the things that also came to me is that as we approach the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, that in that document, it said something about everyone having the right to freedom. Everyone. So I want to have a conversation between the descendants of the Europeans and the descendants of the African people to ask that question: did we get there yet? And if we didn't, do we want to? And if we do, what do we need to do in order to move towards the fulfillment of what was signed in that Declaration of Independence? And sometimes it's difficult because there is a hard conversation to have. There is shame. We don't want to talk about slavery in this country. So as soon as you say something about enslaved or slavery, people either begin to feel shame, they begin to feel angry, they begin to get defensive, they have different kinds of emotions that get in the way of us just talking with each other. So I'm hoping that this project will help us begin some very difficult and uncomfortable conversations.
Do you think that's the only challenge, or are there more challenges to seeing this project to fruition?
Well, I think that's the biggest one. I wouldn't even say that it's money, although we need finances in order to do the project. But once we understand what we're trying to do together, the resource people share. We've gotten all kinds of volunteers to help, who make commitments to help. So the most difficult, I think, is just us being willing to talk with each other and be honest with each other.
So this is an evolving project. There's no end date, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the fundraising you just spoke about, tell us a little about your efforts on fundraising. You have some bricks over here, I see.
Yes, we have a brick fundraising project. This is the maquette. This is an example of what the monument will look like. It is exquisite, I must say.
That's going on the obelisk that's up there now?
Yes.
Okay.
They were there today measuring it for it's going to have black granite on it and bronze. It's going to be 22 feet tall, so it'll be the tallest monument in the cemetery. And around it will be bricks. So we have a brick fundraiser where we're inviting the community to purchase a brick on behalf of their relatives. And so and we're actually going to have another fundraiser coming up May the 25th. Because we do need to continue to raise monies not only for the monument but for the interpretive museum and for the research. The research is important. It's important that we physically see the monument, but what's even more important is that we learn the stories, that we're able to tell those stories and tell the contributions of what our ancestors have done in Elizabeth, in the state of New Jersey, and in the country.
So in my opinion, this is probably the biggest project, and especially during Black History Month in February. It's something that we as a community should highlight even more.
Yeah.
And I just commend you for all of your efforts. And I know that grant is something that I asked Stan to look into, and I'm thrilled that he followed up with you on that. He's a good guy, and he's a hard worker. So do you see a completion of this project?
Absolutely.
You do?
We will have the unveiling on June the 18th of this year.
Okay.
June the 18th, during Juneteenth, we plan to have a large celebration starting with a parade from the waterfront over to the church. Then we'll have...
It's a long walk?
It's a long walk, but we're going to have marching bands and cars and floats. We want to celebrate this. The ancestors want their names called. They want their stories told. Then we will have the unveiling, and then we'll have celebration, food, and music for the community, and everyone is invited to be a part of it.
But you could see this project continuing after that day, right?
Absolutely.
In the education process, and possibly more names or possibly descendants coming forward.
Absolutely.
In the future.
Absolutely. The unveiling is just the beginning. We have a lot of research to do. We're talking about 313, potentially 384 families, names. So there's a lot, and we need help with the research part of it as well.
Well, I met a young lady in your church who did a lot of the research on the Europeans, and she was there for the placing of the wreath. We had her on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Her research was phenomenal. She works at an airport, Old Bridge Airport. Her research was phenomenal.
Yes.
You got to get her involved.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. She just, the things she wrote were just, it takes a lot of time.
Yes. Yeah. That's why this is a project that's starting, but it's about people. It's about human beings. So as we continue to roll back the layers and learn about who we are, the last thing that we plan to do this year is to take the maquette that I showed to you earlier. This is a pre-maquette. This is not even actually the maquette. The maquette is beautiful, but we're going to take the maquette to Ghana. So we're leaving December the 28th. We'll be there from December 28th to January the 11th. So it's almost full circle. It's symbolically taking the ancestors back home to Africa. It's ongoing, and we invite the community to please be involved with the work that we're doing.
We don't know where they came from, though, right? I mean, that would be almost impossible to figure that out.
Well, I don't know if it's impossible, but we haven't gotten that far in our research. But we have, there are families that are still around in Elizabeth, and we have persons who have begun to help us with research. So to be able to find out where some of them, where they came from, I don't know if they all came from the same place. That's part of the research, and that's what's really important. It's important for our children, for young people, to know that they have a history, that they didn't begin here. They began somewhere else, and they have a very rich history. So we believe that as we teach our young people who they are, if we can get beyond the false narratives that have been created and tell the true stories, then it surely will help our communities, all of our communities.
Pastor Lundy, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on the show. Your knowledge, your enthusiasm is definitely catchy, and we're thrilled to have you here in Elizabeth, and look forward to helping however we can to see this project come to fruition.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. For Pastor Lundy, I'm Chris Bollwage. We'll see you next week on another edition of Our City.